Picture yourself on a wheel that never stops turning. One moment you're at the top experiencing pleasure, success, and satisfaction. The next moment you're spinning downward into pain, loss, and disappointment. Just when you think you've found solid ground, the wheel turns again, throwing you into yet another situation you didn't choose and can't control. You try to hold on to the good moments, but they slip through your fingers. You try to avoid the painful ones, but they find you anyway. This isn't a metaphor for a bad day or a difficult period in your life. According to Tibetan Buddhism, this is the fundamental condition of existence itself, a cycle of birth, death, and rebirth called Samsara that has been spinning since beginningless time. But here's the revolutionary teaching. This cycle can be broken. Complete liberation is possible, and Tibetan Buddhism offers the most detailed roadmap ever created for achieving it. If you're exhausted by the endless pursuit of happiness that never lasts, if you're ready to discover genuine freedom beyond temporary pleasures and pains, subscribe now and activate notifications, because what you're about to learn could be your path to ultimate liberation. Samsara is a Sanskrit word that literally means wandering or cycling. In Tibetan Buddhist philosophy, it refers to the conditioned existence we're all trapped in, the realm of birth, aging, sickness, and death that repeats endlessly across countless lifetimes. This isn't just a teaching about reincarnation in the sense of coming back as different people or animals. It's a comprehensive description of how ignorance and karma keep consciousness bound in patterns of suffering that perpetuate themselves automatically unless you intervene with wisdom and practice. The tradition describes 6 realms of samsaric existence, each characterized by particular types of suffering and particular predominant mental states. The hell realms are states of intense anger and aggression, where beings experience unimaginable torment. The hungry ghost realm is characterized by insatiable craving and addiction, where beings have enormous bellies but tiny throats, never able to satisfy their desperate hunger. The animal realm represents ignorance and stupidity, where beings live without awareness, driven purely by instinct and fear. The human realm, which we currently inhabit, is marked by birth, aging, sickness, death, and the perpetual dissatisfaction of wanting what we don't have and fearing to lose what we do have. The jealous God realm is dominated by envy and competitiveness, where beings fight endlessly for status and power. The God realm appears most pleasant, with long life and abundant pleasure, but it's still suffering because it's impermanent, and when God's merit exhausts, they fall into lower realms with full awareness of what they're losing. These 6 realms aren't necessarily literal places you're reborn into, though traditional Tibetan Buddhism does teach them as actual destinations. They're also psychological states you can experience within a human lifetime. When you're consumed by rage, you're experiencing the hell realm. When you're in the grip of addiction, unable to satisfy your craving, you're in the hungry ghost realm. When you're acting unconsciously, driven by habits you don't examine, you're in the animal realm. When you're consumed by jealousy and competition, you're in the jealous God realm. When you're intoxicated by success and pleasure, convinced it will last forever, you're in the God realm. You cycle through these states constantly, driven by karma and the fundamental ignorance that creates karma. What makes this cycle so insidious is that it's self-perpetuating. Your ignorance about reality's true nature leads you to act in ways that create karma. That karma ripens as experiences that reinforce your ignorance, leading to more karmic actions, creating more experiences, in an endless feedback loop. You seek happiness in external conditions, in relationships, achievements, possessions, experiences. When you obtain what you desire, there's brief satisfaction, but it quickly fades, leaving you searching for the next thing. When you encounter what you dislike, you suffer and struggle to escape it. This constant grasping and aversion is the engine that keeps the wheel of samsara turning. The Buddha's great realization 25 centuries ago was that this cycle is optional, not inevitable. Samsara isn't imposed by a cosmic force or a creator deity. It's generated by your own mind's confusion about reality. And because it's generated by your mind, it can be dissolved by your mind. This is the first noble truth made specific. Suffering exists and has a particular structure. The second noble truth: this suffering has a cause, namely craving and ignorance. The third noble truth, perhaps the most revolutionary, suffering can cease completely and permanently. And the fourth noble truth, there is a path to that cessation. This path to liberation is what Tibetan Buddhism has specialized in mapping with extraordinary precision. Drawing on the full spectrum of Buddhist teachings transmitted from India, refined through centuries of practice in Himalayan isolation, the Tibetan masters created what might be called a science of liberation. They identified exactly what needs to be understood, what needs to be abandoned, what needs to be cultivated, and what needs to be realized to break free from samsara completely and irreversibly. If this resonates with something you've always felt but couldn't articulate, hit that like button and stay with us, because we're about to explore the specific mechanisms that keep you trapped and the specific practices that set you free. The root cause of samsaric bondage, according to Tibetan Buddhism, is ignorance, but not ignorance in the ordinary sense of lacking information. This is a fundamental misperception about the nature of reality itself, what the tradition calls grasping at inherent existence. You perceive yourself and all phenomena as having solid, independent, permanent existence. You experience yourself as a fixed self that moves through a world of fixed objects. This perception seems so obviously true that questioning it appears absurd. Yet the Tibetan teachings insist this perception is the root delusion that generates all suffering. The antidote to this ignorance is wisdom realizing emptiness or shunyata. Emptiness doesn't mean nothingness or that things don't exist at all. It means that all phenomena, including yourself, are empty of inherent, independent, permanent existence. Everything that exists does so only in dependence on causes and conditions and only in relation to other things. Your body exists in dependence on food, air, parents, countless causes stretching back to the origin of the universe. Your mind exists in dependence on brain, body, previous moments of consciousness, objects of awareness. Nothing about you exists independently or permanently. You are a process, not a thing, a flowing river of interdependent causes and effects with no solid center. When you realize this emptiness directly, not just intellectually but experientially, the grasping that generates karma begins to dissolve. You still act, still make choices, still engage with life, but you're not acting from the confused belief that there's a solid self that needs to be protected and enhanced. You're acting from wisdom that sees through the illusion of inherent existence. Actions motivated by this wisdom don't create binding karma. They're still causes that produce effects, but they don't perpetuate samsaric bondage because they're not contaminated by fundamental ignorance. This is why emptiness is considered the central insight in Tibetan Buddhism, particularly in the Madhyamaka or Middle Way philosophical tradition founded by the Indian master Nagarjuna. His text, the Mula Madhyama Kakarika, the fundamental verses on the Middle Way, systematically demonstrates that all phenomena are empty of inherent existence through rigorous logical analysis. When you examine anything closely, you can't find it as a solid, independent thing. A car exists in dependence on its parts, but when you look at the parts individually, none of them is the car. The collection of parts isn't the car either because the collection is just a concept. Yet the car clearly exists conventionally. It functions, it moves, it serves purposes. Understanding this simultaneous conventional existence and ultimate emptiness is the wisdom that liberates. But wisdom alone isn't sufficient for breaking samsara's cycle. The Tibetan tradition emphasizes that you need both wisdom and method, both understanding reality's nature and cultivating positive qualities. This is where the bodhisattva path becomes essential. A bodhisattva is someone who has generated bodhicitta, the awakening mind, which has two aspects. The first is the aspiration to achieve complete enlightenment. The second, more important, is the motivation to achieve that enlightenment specifically to benefit all sentient beings, to lead them all to liberation. This might seem impossibly idealistic. How could you possibly liberate all beings in the universe? But the teaching makes perfect sense when you understand emptiness. If all beings are fundamentally interconnected, if the boundaries between self and other are ultimately illusory, then working for others' liberation is working for your own, and vice versa. The sharp distinction between self-interest and altruism collapses when you realize there is no separate self to be interested. Bodhicitta becomes the most natural and logical motivation possible. The Bodhisattva path involves cultivating what are called the 6 perfections or paramitas: generosity, ethical discipline, patience, joyous effort, meditative concentration, and wisdom. These aren't arbitrary virtues. They're the specific qualities that counteract the mental poisons and karmic patterns that perpetuate samsara. Generosity counteracts miserliness and attachment to possessions. Ethical discipline counteracts harmful behaviors driven by the 3 poisons. Patience counteracts anger and aversion. Joyous effort counteracts laziness and discouragement. Meditative concentration counteracts distraction and mental scattering. Wisdom counteracts fundamental ignorance about reality's nature. Comment below if you're beginning to see how these pieces fit together, how each teaching addresses a specific aspect of the problem of samsaric bondage. And keep watching, because we're about to explore the specific meditation practices that transform understanding into realization. Tibetan Buddhism offers graduated paths to liberation that meet practitioners wherever they are and guide them systematically toward complete awakening. The most famous of these graduated paths is the Lamrim, the stages of the path to enlightenment, systematized by the 11th century Indian master Atisha and elaborated by the 14th century Tibetan master Tsongkhapa in his monumental text, the Lamrim Chenmo, the great treatise on the stages of the path. The Lamrim presents the entire Buddhist path in a structured sequence designed to transform your mind progressively. It begins with preliminary practices that prepare you for serious spiritual work. You cultivate reliance on a qualified spiritual teacher who can guide you skillfully. You reflect deeply on the precious human rebirth you currently possess, recognizing how rare it is to have the opportunity, interest, and capacity for Dharma practice. You meditate on death and impermanence, understanding that your time is limited and you don't know when death will come. These reflections aren't meant to depress you but to motivate you, to help you prioritize what actually matters instead of wasting your life on trivial pursuits. The path continues with teachings appropriate for practitioners of small capacity, those primarily concerned with avoiding future suffering. You learn about karma and its effects, how your actions inevitably produce corresponding results. You contemplate the sufferings of the lower realms, the hell beings, hungry ghosts, and animals who experience intense misery due to negative karma. This isn't meant to frighten you into compliance, but to help you take ethical discipline seriously, to see clearly how harmful actions lead to harmful consequences. You practice refuge, formally committing to the Buddha as your example, the Dharma as your path, and the Sangha as your companions and supporters. Then the path addresses practitioners of medium capacity, those seeking personal liberation from all of samsara, not just its worst manifestations. Here you study the 4 noble truths in depth. You examine the nature of suffering, not just in the lower realms, but throughout all 6 realms of existence, even the apparently pleasant God realm. You investigate the causes of suffering, tracing them to karma and ultimately to the 3 poisons: ignorance, attachment, and aversion. You contemplate cessation, the possibility of complete freedom from suffering, understanding that nirvana isn't annihilation but the cessation of ignorance and its effects. You study the path that leads to cessation, beginning with ethical discipline, developing through meditative concentration and culminating in wisdom. At this stage, you practice what's called the 3 higher trainings. The training in ethical discipline involves observing precepts appropriate to your circumstances, abandoning harmful actions of body, speech, and mind, and cultivating their positive opposites. This isn't moralistic rule following. It's recognizing that certain behaviors naturally perpetuate suffering, while others create conditions for liberation. The training in concentration involves developing shamatha or calm abiding meditation, stabilizing your mind so it can be used effectively as an instrument for investigating reality. The training in wisdom involves vipassana or insight meditation, using your stabilized mind to examine phenomena closely and realize their empty nature. But the Lamrim doesn't stop with personal liberation. It points beyond the arhat ideal, the individual who achieves nirvana for themselves, toward the bodhisattva path for practitioners of great capacity. Here you recognize that seeking only your own liberation while countless beings remain trapped in suffering is insufficient. You generate Bodhicitta, the awakening mind that aspires to lead all beings to enlightenment. This is considered the entrance to the Mahayana, the great vehicle, and it completely transforms your practice. Now every action becomes infused with Bodhicitta motivation. You practice the 6 perfections not just to purify your own karma, but to develop the capacity to help others effectively. You study emptiness not just to free yourself, but to understand reality so clearly that you can guide others to the same understanding. You cultivate compassion not as a pleasant feeling but as a fierce commitment to alleviating all suffering everywhere. The path becomes vast, encompassing countless lifetimes of practice, but also joyful because you're no longer working for the limited goal of personal peace, but for the unlimited goal of universal awakening. Share this video with someone who feels trapped in cycles they can't break, who's searching for something deeper than temporary happiness. These teachings are meant to spread, to reach everyone ready to hear them. Tibetan Buddhism also offers an accelerated path called Vajrayana, or the diamond vehicle. While the Sutrayana paths described in the Lamrim can take countless lifetimes to traverse, Vajrayana claims to offer methods for achieving full enlightenment within a single lifetime, or even within a few years for exceptionally devoted and capable practitioners. This isn't because Vajrayana is superior to other Buddhist paths, but because it employs extraordinarily powerful and potentially dangerous techniques that require extensive preparation and careful guidance. Vajrayana works directly with subtle body energies, with visualization practices, with mantra recitation, with deity yoga where you visualize yourself as already enlightened, embodying the qualities of a fully awakened Buddha. The logic is profound. In ordinary practice, you gradually purify defilements and gradually develop qualities over extended time. But Vajrayana takes the result as the path. You practice as if you're already enlightened, training your mind to align with your ultimate nature rather than your current confusion. These practices work with what the tradition calls the subtle body, the network of energy channels, winds or energies, and drops or essences that parallel and influence the physical body. Through advanced yogic techniques, practitioners learn to direct subtle energies into the central channel, dissolving the knots at the chakras or energy centers, producing experiences that mirror the dying process and the bardos. They're essentially simulating death, bardo, and rebirth voluntarily while alive, training themselves to recognize the clear light nature of mind that appears nakedly at death. But Vajrayana is considered secret not because it's hidden from unworthy students, but because it can be dangerous if practiced without proper foundation. You need stable ethical discipline so your practice isn't corrupted by self-centered motivation. You need strong concentration so you can visualize clearly and hold complex meditations. You need genuine understanding of emptiness so you don't mistake the deities and pure lands of visualization practice for externally existing realities. And you need bodhicitta, so your powerful practices serve all beings rather than inflating your ego. When properly practiced with authentic guidance, Vajrayana can dramatically accelerate progress. The tradition is filled with stories of practitioners achieving rainbow body, where at death their physical body dissolves into light, leaving only hair and nails behind, or achieving Mahamudra realization, directly perceiving the nature of mind, or becoming siddhas, accomplished masters who demonstrate miraculous abilities not for display, but as signs of having transcended ordinary physical limitations. But whether you practice Vajrayana or more gradual paths, certain elements are universal for breaking samsara's cycle. You must develop renunciation, the genuine wish to be free from samsaric existence not because you hate life, but because you see clearly that conditioned pleasures are ultimately unsatisfying. You must develop bodhicitta, expanding your concern beyond yourself to embrace all beings. And you must develop correct view, the wisdom realizing emptiness that cuts the root of ignorant grasping. These 3 principal aspects of the path, as Tsongkhapa called them, work together synergistically. Renunciation without bodhicitta becomes selfish escapism. Bodhicitta without wisdom becomes naive sentimentality. Wisdom without compassion becomes cold intellectualism. But when all 3 are present, genuine transformation becomes possible. The actual process of liberation is described through what are called the 5 paths. The path of accumulation is where you're gathering the causes for liberation, studying teachings, beginning practices, establishing the foundation. The path of preparation is where you're getting closer to direct realization, developing increasingly clear understanding of emptiness conceptually. The path of seeing is the breakthrough moment when you directly perceive emptiness non-conceptually for the first time, becoming an Arya, or noble being. The path of meditation is the long process of familiarizing yourself with that realization, gradually eliminating more subtle obscurations. And the path of no more learning is complete enlightenment, Buddhahood itself, where all limitations have been transcended and all qualities fully developed. Tibetan Buddhism maps this journey with remarkable precision, describing 10 grounds or bhumis that bodhisattvas traverse, each characterized by particular realizations and abilities. On the first ground, you can manifest in hundreds of forms simultaneously, benefiting beings in multiple realms. By the 8th ground, you've abandoned even subtle obscurations and have control over lifespan and birth circumstances. By the 10th ground, you're on the threshold of Buddhahood, needing only final empowerment to achieve complete awakening. These descriptions might sound mythological or exaggerated to modern minds, but consider what they're actually claiming. They're saying that consciousness, properly trained and freed from limiting beliefs, has capabilities far beyond what ordinary humans experience. They're saying that the boundaries we assume are fixed, between mind and matter, between self and other, between possible and impossible, are actually permeable and can be transcended through realization. Leave a comment sharing where you are on this path. Are you just learning about these teachings? Have you been practicing for years? Are you struggling with particular obstacles? This community can support you, and your experience can support others. The Tibetan tradition also addresses a question many practitioners struggle with. How do you maintain ordinary life while pursuing liberation? Do you need to become a monk or nun, retreat from society, abandon relationships and responsibilities? The answer is nuanced. For some practitioners, monasticism is ideal. Removing worldly distractions allows intensive practice that can lead to rapid progress. Many of Tibet's greatest masters achieved realization through years or decades in solitary retreat. But the tradition also honors lay practitioners, householders who maintain families and careers while practicing Dharma. The 84 Mahasiddhas, legendary Indian masters who achieved supreme realization, came from all walks of life: kings and beggars, scholars and laborers, housewives and prostitutes. What mattered wasn't their external circumstances, but their internal commitment and realization. The key is to transform whatever life situation you're in into the path. If you have a job, let it be an opportunity to practice generosity, patience, and ethical conduct. If you have a family, let relationships teach you compassion and selflessness. If you face illness or poverty, use them to develop renunciation and empathy for others suffering. Nothing is inherently an obstacle. Everything can be used as practice if you approach it with wisdom and skillful means. The tradition describes different types of practitioners based on their capacity and circumstances. Some have the karma and aspiration to renounce worldly life completely and pursue enlightenment single-mindedly. Others practice while engaged with the world, gradually transforming their minds over many lifetimes. Some focus on ethical discipline as their primary practice. Others emphasize devotion and guru yoga. Still others engage in philosophical study and debate. The Buddha taught 84,000 different approaches because beings have 84,000 different dispositions. What's essential is finding an approach that matches your capacity and circumstances while still challenging you to grow. You need a qualified teacher who can assess where you are and guide you appropriately. You need a community of practitioners who support and inspire you. You need access to authentic teachings that present the complete path without distortion. And you need personal commitment, the willingness to actually practice rather than just accumulate intellectual knowledge. This last point is crucial. You can study Buddhism for decades, memorize texts, understand philosophy deeply, and remain completely bound in samsara if you never apply the teachings to transform your mind. Liberation doesn't come from knowing about emptiness. It comes from realizing emptiness directly through sustained meditation practice. It doesn't come from understanding bodhicitta conceptually, but from generating genuine concern for all beings that manifests in your actual behavior. The test of whether you're progressing on the path is simple. Are your mental afflictions diminishing? Are you less angry, less greedy, less confused than before? Are you more compassionate, more patient, more generous? Are you able to remain present and aware in situations that previously triggered automatic reactivity? These are the signs of genuine progress, far more reliable than exotic experiences or special states achieved in meditation. Tibetan Buddhism is ultimately practical, empirical, experiential. The teachings make specific claims about how mind works and how it can be transformed. These claims can be tested. If you practice ethical discipline, does your life become less chaotic and more harmonious? If you practice concentration meditation, does your mind become more stable and focused? If you practice analytical meditation on emptiness, do you begin seeing through the solidity of phenomena? If you cultivate compassion, do you feel more connected to others and less isolated in self-concern? The tradition invites investigation rather than demanding belief. The Buddha himself said not to accept teachings just because he taught them, or because they're traditional, but to examine them carefully, test them through practice, and accept only what you verify through direct experience. This empirical approach is what makes Buddhism compatible with modern scientific thinking, even as it addresses dimensions of experience that science hasn't yet explored. As we bring this exploration toward completion, consider what you've learned. Samsara, the cycle of conditioned existence characterized by birth, aging, sickness, death, and perpetual dissatisfaction, is the fundamental problem. It's driven by ignorance about reality's nature, particularly by grasping at inherent existence when all phenomena are actually empty of inherent existence. This ignorance produces karma through the three poisons of attachment, aversion, and delusion. Karma ripens as experiences that reinforce ignorance, creating a self-perpetuating cycle. Breaking this cycle requires wisdom realizing emptiness, which cuts ignorance at its root. But wisdom must be combined with method, particularly the Bodhicitta motivation to achieve enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. The path involves ethical discipline, meditative concentration, and wisdom, cultivated through graduated stages from initial renunciation, through direct realization, and ultimately to complete Buddhahood. Tibetan Buddhism offers both gradual paths like the Lamrim that can span many lifetimes, and accelerated Vajrayana paths that claim to achieve enlightenment in a single lifetime. The journey isn't easy. It requires confronting your deepest patterns, surrendering cherished illusions, maintaining practice through doubt and difficulty. But it's possible. Thousands of practitioners throughout history have achieved liberation. The current Dalai Lama embodies these teachings, as do many other living masters. You have the same fundamental capacity they do because Buddha nature, the potential for complete awakening, exists in every being without exception. What will you do with this knowledge? Will you let it remain interesting information, or will you let it transform your life? The teachings are available. Qualified teachers exist. Practice communities are accessible. The only question is whether you're ready to commit, to actually walk the path rather than just reading about it. If this video has inspired you, if something has shifted in how you understand your existence and its possibilities, that's a sign. That's your Buddha nature recognizing truth. Honor that recognition by taking action. Subscribe to this channel and activate notifications so you continue receiving teachings that support your journey. Share this video with others who are searching, who feel trapped in cycles they can't break, who sense there must be something more than the endless pursuit of fleeting pleasures. Most importantly, find a way to practice. Even if it's just 10 minutes of meditation each morning, even if it's simply paying more attention to your intentions before acting, even if it's reading one Dharma text slowly and carefully, that's how transformation begins, not through grand gestures or dramatic experiences, but through consistent application of wisdom to your actual life. The Tibetan masters teach that every moment of practice plants seeds that will ripen as future wisdom and compassion. Every moment of mindfulness weakens the chains of karma. Every moment of genuine compassion expands your heart beyond its habitual boundaries. Liberation isn't somewhere else sometime in the future. It's the fruition of causes you create right now through how you think, speak, and act. May all beings recognize the suffering of samsara. May all beings develop genuine renunciation. May all beings generate bodhicitta. May all beings realize emptiness directly. May all beings achieve complete liberation and lead all others to that same freedom. Thank you for engaging with these profound teachings. Thank you for having the courage to question your assumptions and the aspiration to transform. May your practice flourish and may you quickly attain full enlightenment for the benefit of all.